Today's story is very sad, but also extremely important. Mental health is one of the most vital aspects of our lives, yet it is so often overlooked. Without the right care and support, struggles can grow silently until they reach a breaking point. It also highlights how crucial support is for young mothers who often feel overwhelmed by their responsibilities and isolated. In the Houston suburb of Clear Lake City, Texas, during the summer of 2001, a family tragedy unfolded that shocked the nation and demonstrated just how essential proper understanding and support can be. Today, we will learn the story of the Yates family, which, sadly, does not have a happy ending. Andrea Pia Yates, née Kennedy, was born on the 2nd of July 1964. She grew up in Houston, Texas, as the youngest of 4 children. From an early age, she was known for her intelligence and careful, responsible nature, often observing and learning from her older siblings. Her childhood was shaped by a deeply religious upbringing, with strict expectations that sometimes felt overwhelming. The family appeared happy and harmonious, though reportedly some members struggled with emotional issues. The details are not fully known, but it was understood that her father had a tendency to drink, which exacerbated his mental health struggles. These were the 1960s and 70s, and awareness of mental health issues was far less developed than it is today. According to Andrea herself, later in life, her siblings also suffered from depression and bipolar disorder, so her parents were somewhat familiar with these issues. From a young age, Andrea was well liked and had a close group of friends. She was a good student with a particular interest in chemistry and biology. She preferred staying at home and reading rather than going out with friends. She was also the captain of her school swimming team and the ideal daughter who rarely caused trouble. Andrea, like her family, was very devout. During her high school years, while her peers were exploring their first relationships, Andrea showed little interest in romance, focusing instead on her studies. She set high standards for herself in every area of life and, in her own view, often felt she did not meet those expectations. She frequently believed she had done something wrong or could have done better, holding herself to strict standards. She was also highly self-critical of her appearance, which likely contributed to the development of eating issues. This intense self-criticism affected her mood. By the age of 16 or 17, it was clear that something was affecting Andrea's mental health. Early warning signs indicated that professional help was needed, and her parents sought specialist care, especially as they had previous experience with such issues in the family. Proper treatment began to have a positive effect, and Andrea started to feel better. Even during this challenging period, she excelled academically. The main change was in her mood, but fortunately, it was manageable at that time. In 1982, she graduated from Milby High School. After school, she decided to become a nurse, completing a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston before graduating from the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. In 1986, Andrea began working as a nurse, specializing in cancer care. From 1986 until 1994, she was a registered nurse at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, where she earned high praise for her work. She was described as helpful, empathetic, and sensitive, approaching her patients with genuine care. At the age of 23, Andrea sought a romantic relationship and began dating. Around the age of 24, she entered a relationship that was unfortunately unsuccessful, which again affected her mental health. This was the second time in her life she had needed her family's support. Each failure brought significant emotional challenges and low moods. Thankfully, this period was not permanent, and a new person soon entered her life. Andrea was not one to approach others first, but in the summer of 1989, she decided to speak to a handsome neighbor, Russell "Rusty" Yates, a NASA engineer living at the Sunscape Apartments in Houston. Russell was the same age as Andrea and came from a very religious family. He had been popular at school, was sociable, articulate, and ambitious. Financially, Russell was well positioned with a good job. Like Andrea, he dreamed of finding a life partner and starting a family. Although he had dated various women, he had not formed a deep relationship. Rusty believed in a traditional family model, the husband working and the wife managing the home and children. They quickly discovered many shared values and became a couple. They decided to live together, but agreed to wait until marriage before consummating the relationship, reflecting their evangelical Christian beliefs that emphasized chastity and traditional gender roles. Andrea was happy that someone like Russell had noticed her, although she still struggled with self-confidence. Over the next 4 years, they worked, saved, and planned for a shared future. On the 17th of April 1993, they married, and at their wedding, they proudly told guests they hoped to have as many children as possible. In interviews, Rusty described Andrea as extremely uncomfortable with her body, often dressing and undressing in private and not enjoying sex. He attributed this discomfort to her strict upbringing and religious beliefs, which may have contributed to later mental health challenges. Following their wedding, Andrea and Rusty settled into a suburban home in the quiet Clear Lake neighborhood of Houston. Their first child, Noah Jacob Yates, was born on the 26th of February 1994. Some sources suggest this was the first point at which Andrea's mental health began to decline. Around this time, she also gave up work to focus on raising their son, spending most of her time at home. She began to experience sleep problems, which are common with a young child. Andrea's family reported that Rusty, as a father, was not particularly helpful, leaving her feeling somewhat overwhelmed. Friends and family were busy with their own lives and could not provide her with frequent support. Adding to the strain, she became pregnant with their second child, and in 1995, their son John was born. Meanwhile, Rusty received a lucrative 6-month contract in Florida, providing an opportunity to earn more. The family moved to a small trailer in Seminole, Florida. The cramped living conditions added to the pressures Andrea faced as a new mother, intensifying her stress and isolation. She was far from her family and felt very alone. Moreover, she continued to be very self-critical, believing she was failing as a mother. After their time in Florida, Andrea and Rusty returned to Houston, purchasing a 1978 GMC motorhome. This decision was influenced by their association with Michael Woroniecki, an itinerant preacher whose teachings emphasized a minimalist, faith-based lifestyle. Rusty admired Woroniecki's way of life, believing it aligned with their religious values. Consequently, the Yates family adopted a similar lifestyle, living in the motorhome as part of their commitment to homeschooling and religious devotion. These were far from ideal conditions for a family with young children. Friends and relatives were surprised, particularly since the family was financially able to afford a house. Michael Woroniecki, known for his fire and brimstone teachings, had a notable influence on Andrea and Rusty. Their connection began in the mid-1980s when Rusty met Woroniecki while he was preaching at Auburn University. They corresponded by mail for several years, and in 1989, Rusty introduced Andrea to the Woroniecki family. The two families kept in touch through letters and phone calls, and in 1998, the Yates family visited the Woroniekis in Florida. During this visit, Rusty purchased a 1978 GMC motorhome from Woroniecki. However, after a confrontation in which Woroniecki criticized Rusty for prioritizing his job over his family, their relationship began to deteriorate. Woroniecki believed that children who were not saved by the age of 13 or 14 were destined for eternal damnation. This belief stemmed from his interpretation of biblical teachings, which he often conveyed through his newsletter, The Perilous Times. In one publication, he lamented the fate of children born to worldly mothers, asking, "What becomes of the children of such a Jezebel?" In 1997, the couple welcomed their third son, Paul. By this time, they had decided on homeschooling, which Andrea was to oversee, despite her mental health unfortunately worsening. Her acquaintance with Michael Woroniecki made her fear that her children's souls would not be saved, as she believed she was not a good enough mother. In 1999, their fourth child, Luke, was born, and Andrea's condition deteriorated dramatically. She experienced severe depressive thoughts and even contemplated ending her own life, attempting suicide twice. She felt she was failing as a mother and struggled to cope with 4 children largely on her own, while her husband spent most of his time at work. Andrea was admitted to hospital, where doctors attributed her condition to complications from her most recent childbirth. A physician spoke to the couple, advising that for Andrea's mental health, it would be best not to have any more children. Her poor condition was linked to the demands of parenthood and the heavy burden she carried. Dr. Starbranch later testified that she urged Andrea and Rusty not to have any more children, warning that it would guarantee future psychotic depression. Andrea was prescribed strong medication, and her family began to understand the seriousness of the situation. They visited more frequently and took an active interest in how she was coping. Her mother came more often to help with the house and children, and her mother-in-law also became more involved. As for Rusty, accounts vary. Andrea's family claimed that he did very little with the children and often downplayed Andrea's mental health struggles. Her brother, Brian Kennedy, reported that Rusty had told him that all depressed people needed was a swift kick in the pants to get them motivated, a statement that suggested a lack of empathy and understanding of Andrea's condition. Andrea's mother, Karen Kennedy, reported that Rusty admitted he had never changed a diaper before, even after the birth of their 4th child, Luke. On one occasion, when she asked him to change Luke's diaper, he replied, "Well, that'd be a first." "I have never changed a diaper before." This admission, made during a visit to the Kennedy home, highlighted concerns about Rusty's involvement in childcare. Soon after, Andrea discontinued her medication and became pregnant again, though she unfortunately miscarried, which likely worsened her condition. Around this time, Rusty decided to purchase a house for the family, which greatly pleased Andrea. She reportedly approached him to thank him, surprising Rusty, as Andrea had never openly expressed her desires before. She had never complained about living in the motorhome. Andrea soon became pregnant again, and in 2001, the couple welcomed a daughter, Mary. Andrea was overjoyed with the long-awaited baby girl. She made matching clothes for herself and Mary and seemed very happy, despite frequently skipping her prescribed medication. Rusty knew that Andrea sometimes stopped taking her medication, but did not fully appreciate the dangers of this behavior. Rusty did seek medical attention for his wife and was actively involved in her psychiatric care. He consulted multiple doctors and was aware of her mental health challenges. However, his understanding of her condition and the severity of her illness appeared limited. Andrea's mental state seemed stable until 12 March 2001, when her father passed away. He had suffered from Alzheimer's for many years, and Andrea had been very close to him. Following his death, her condition deteriorated severely. She stopped speaking, stared at a single point, and ate almost nothing. She began hearing voices that encouraged her to harm her children. She believed she was being watched and that cameras were everywhere. Later, she described feeling as if she were part of a live television show. Throughout this time, she feared that her children would not reach heaven because of her. She interpreted her children's behavior as evidence of evil forces taking control. When asked why she thought this, she said her eldest son had been rude to his grandmother, which she took as proof that her children were beyond redemption. In April 2001, Andrea was hospitalized again after she completely stopped caring for her daughter. On the 1st of April, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital under the care of Dr. Mohammed Saeed. By the 3rd of May, her condition worsened. She became nearly catatonic and filled the bathtub, signaling suicidal intent. On the 4th of May, she was discharged due to insurance limitations despite her severe condition. Andrea was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis, a severe mental illness that can occur after childbirth. Doctors advised Rusty never to leave Andrea alone with the children, and he followed this instruction. Family from both sides assisted, and Andrea's siblings also visited. Her brother recalled that she was completely absent, speaking little, only reading the Bible. She would stare at walls and give ambiguous or disturbing answers when asked questions. Despite her severe condition, she was not rehospitalized because the insurance provider, Blue Cross Blue Shield, subcontracted by Magellan Health Services, had a 10-day limit for psychiatric admissions. This restriction led to her early discharge, even though she was too ill to leave. Doctors later stated that hers was one of the most severe cases they had ever seen. On the morning of the 20th of June 2001, Andrea Yates, suffering from severe postpartum psychosis, drowned her 5 children in the bathtub of their home in Clear Lake, Texas. Her husband, Rusty Yates, had left for work, and Andrea was supposed to be supervised in his absence. He had arranged for his mother, Dora Yates, to arrive about an hour after he left to care for Andrea, but the tragedy occurred before Dora could reach them. Andrea began with her sons, Paul, aged 3, Luke, aged 2, and John, aged 5, drowning them one by one in the bathtub. She then drowned her 6-month-old daughter, Mary, leaving her floating in the water. When her eldest son, Noah, aged 7, entered the bathroom and saw Mary, he asked what had happened. Noah ran, but Andrea chased him and drowned him as well. Afterwards, she placed all 5 children on the bed and covered them with a sheet. She positioned her infant Mary in the crook of John's arm so he could protect her in the afterlife, as John had been a particularly caring older brother. Andrea then called 911, requesting an officer without explaining the situation, and phoned Rusty, telling him to come home immediately. Officers arrived quickly at the scene, but tragically, there was nothing they could do. Andrea was arrested. Following the murders, she reportedly expressed concern for her children's souls and the arrangements for their funerals, asking questions about how they would be buried or memorialized. These actions reflected her distorted thoughts, rooted in severe postpartum psychosis. She believed she was saving her children spiritually, which was central to her actions.
To accomplish them when you did take your children's lives?
Maybe in their innocent years, God would take them up.
God would take them up to be in heaven, is that what you mean? All right. And if you had not taken their lives, what did you think would happen to them?
I guess they would have continued stumbling.
And where would they end up?
Hell.
Which showed you they weren't right.
Well, they weren't. They just did a lot of silly stuff and didn't obey.
Didn't obey you when you told them to do things. All right. You mentioned their manners before. Can you give me an example of their manners?
Just like when Rusty's mom would visit, they would just not treat her well, call her names.
Be disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, you concluded that they were not righteous, and you're a religious person, and explain to me what you meant by not being righteous.
Well, they didn't do things God likes.
Andrea reportedly accepted her arrest without resistance, believing that her actions were necessary to save her children's souls, and that legal consequences were secondary to this perceived moral obligation. Andrea Yates was initially convicted of capital murder in 2002 and sentenced to life in prison. That conviction was later overturned on appeal due to false testimony, and she was retried in 2006. On the 6th of January 2005, a Texas Court of Appeals reversed the conviction after California psychiatrist and prosecution witness Dr. Park Yates admitted he had given materially false testimony during the trial. Yates had claimed that shortly before the murders, an episode of Law and Order had aired featuring a woman who drowned her children and was acquitted by reason of insanity. Author Suzanne O'Malley, covering the trial for the Oprah magazine, the New York Times magazine, and NBC News, who had previously worked for Law and Order, immediately confirmed that no such episode existed. The appellate court ruled unanimously that the jury may have been influenced by Yates's false testimony, necessitating a new trial. At the retrial, Andrea was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to Kerrville State Hospital, a psychiatric facility in Texas, where she has remained under treatment ever since. She has declined multiple opportunities for release hearings, expressing a preference to remain in the hospital where she feels she belongs. Andrea leads a quiet life, engaging in activities like crafting and selling her work to support the Yates Children's Memorial Fund, which raises awareness about postpartum depression. Rusty Yates supported Andrea throughout the first trial, insisting that her actions were the result of severe mental illness. However, the couple's marriage ended in divorce in 2005. Rusty later remarried in 2006, though that marriage also ended in divorce in 2015. Since then, he has maintained a relatively private life, focusing on his work as an engineer. Rusty maintains monthly contact with her, discussing their children and offering support. He has forgiven her and continues to honor their children's memory. The story of Andrea Yates is one of unimaginable tragedy. 5 young lives, Noah, John, Paul, Luke, and Mary, were lost far too soon, leaving behind memories of laughter, innocence, and the bright futures they would never live to see. Their names remain a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences when severe mental illness goes unrecognized, untreated, or unsupported. Andrea's case illustrates just how vital it is to stand beside women in their most vulnerable moments, whether during the struggles of motherhood, the battles with depression, or the silent weight of illnesses that can cloud judgment and distort reality. Compassion, understanding, and timely support can mean the difference between despair and hope, between tragedy and healing. As we remember the Yates children, let their story serve as a call to action, to listen, to help, and to ensure no woman is ever left alone in the depths of her suffering. Thank you so much for listening to this story and for supporting my channel with your comments, likes, and recently with the hypes. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Remember, if you need help, don't be ashamed to ask for it, and always be mindful of your loved ones.